This is Akashvani. In the program Spotlight, now we bring you an exclusive interview with Louis Breuer, International Monetary Fund Senior Resident Representative to India, on strengthening global financial safety net under India's G20 Presidency. Interviewer is Sonu Sood, anchor.
In July, at the third meeting of the G20 finance ministers and central bank governors during India's chairmanship of G20, IMF Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva urged the G20 leadership to strengthen the global financial safety net. To discuss various facets of this crucial goal and other related issues, we have the privilege of speaking with Senior Resident Representative of IMF in India, Mr. Louis Breuer. Mr. Breuer, warm welcome to you from Akashvani.
Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Mr. Breuer, to begin the discussion, we would like to know from you successive global challenges like the pandemic, Russia-Ukraine conflict, and extreme weather events have exacerbated financial stress for all. Can high public debt levels and possibility of default in some countries be tackled by debt restructuring done collaboratively in the G20 spirit of one earth, one family, one future? Do you feel G20 and IMF can do to ensure that long-term developmental goals of these countries don't get derailed?
Let me begin by saying that the most important factor in meeting the development goals of a country is the country's actions themselves. That is, the decisions that the leaders take on economic policies that will affect the outcomes. It is key for countries to follow policies that promote inclusive and sustainable growth and stability. But of course, the international community can and should help, including the IMF. We do this in three ways, basically. One, providing policy advice to countries. Two, sharing international best practices on managing the economy through capacity development. And three, by lending resources to countries that are in financial difficulties. Now, the G20 is the main forum of large economies in the world, and they can be very useful in forging consensus on the global solutions to global challenges, including those that affect the development goals of many countries. And these include things like public debt, climate change, natural disasters, pandemics, and so forth.
Can you tell us about the genesis of Global Sovereign Debt Roundtable GSTR initiative started in late 2022, which was a joint effort of IMF, World Bank, and the current G20 leader, India? What is the key objective of GSTR?
Well, as you mentioned, the Global Sovereign Debt Roundtable was started by a collaborative effort involving the IMF, the World Bank, and India's G20 presidency. And it is historic because it's the first time that it brings together debtor and creditor countries, private sector creditors, and multilateral institutions to discuss issues of debt restructuring. The main objective is to seek solutions to the debt problems of both developing and emerging economies.
So do you think that the emerging economies, the global south, they are getting more emphasis because whenever there is a natural calamity or multiple challenges are there, they are the ones who are more affected?
Exactly, and many countries, including a number of developing countries, are now facing financial stress because of high public debt levels. And this comes after a period that was very difficult for the entire world, which was the pandemic, when economic activity fell and the needs to support populations increase, and with that, public spending. So the stress coming from public debt has intensified in many countries. And Global Sovereign Debt Roundtable does is it brings the key players on this issue, both on the borrowing side and the lending side, to coordinate their actions so that countries that need to reschedule their debt have a modality to do so. This is a very important issue facing many countries, both in Africa and elsewhere.
And can you tell us what are the current major threats for global financial stability, and how can the G20 leadership help to strengthen the global financial safety net?
Well, the international financial sector faces three main risks. One, higher inflation around the world. Two, tighter monetary and financial conditions. And 3, economic and financial geofragmentation. There have been a few cases and a few institutions in the United States and Europe that have had difficulties due to tighter financial conditions. As central banks increase interest rates to fight inflation, liquidity has dried up. And these cases reveal the very difficult tasks that central banks have to both, on the one hand, control inflation through tighter financial conditions, and on the other, protect financial stability. In addition, there have been rising geopolitical tensions among major economies, and this increases concerns about the global economic and financial fragmentation, which could have potentially very important consequences for financial stability.
So we have seen that when the pandemic struck, there was a lot of global cooperation in dealing with the health emergency and vaccination among countries all across the world. So you feel that this situation of inflation, of commodity inflation, that can also be tackled through international cooperation?
Certainly it can, and international cooperation would help in many ways. And in addition, there's another issue that is very important that is out there, and that has to do with climate change. And there also, we need international cooperation. This is a problem that affects everybody, and so the G20 plays an important role in that. Now, going back to the financial sector and your question about what the G20 can do, there's a very important role for the G20, and that is in ensuring that the international financial safety net is well funded. One way to do so is to agree increase of the IMF's quota, which constitutes the IMF's firepower to address financial crises around the world. In addition, the IMF has a variety of programs aimed at supporting developing countries that require additional funding, such as the Poverty Reduction and Growth Trust and the Resilience and Sustainability Trust. These are special programs aimed at helping developing countries increase their standard of living, and they involve, for example, subsidized loans at no interest rate, which ultimately are funded by countries that contribute to these trust funds.
You just now mentioned the challenge of climate change. Now, the issue of climate finance has for long been a bone of contention between developed and developing countries. Hope for progress on this front in the forthcoming G20 Leaders Summit so that our collective fight against climate change can get a major fillip?
I hope we can see progress, as climate change is a very important issue that, like I said, affects everybody. And we see the consequences every day in the news: irregular rainy seasons, more frequent forest fires, hurricanes, monsoons, droughts, and so forth. It is clear that more needs to be done to address this problem, and certainly a key element of a solution is for advanced countries to deliver on their commitments to contribute $100 billion each year in climate change financing. And while there has been progress, more needs to be done in this area in particular. Now, the IMF is trying to do its part. We have recently started a new program, a new lending facility called the Resilience and Sustainability Trust. I'm sorry, the names are very exotic, but that's what they are. And this is basically a program that provides affordable long-term financing to countries undergoing reforms to reduce the risks to the balance of payments, including from climate change. And there are 9 countries that are already benefiting from the resources, including Bangladesh in this neighborhood. Now, we recognize that the IMF disbursements are just a drop in the bucket of the large climate financing needs, which will amount to trillions of dollars annually. So the IMF strategy also looks for ways to promote private flows to climate change investments. And for this, reducing macro risk premium, particularly from exchange rate risks when countries borrow in currencies that are not their own, is very important to mobilize private capital, especially to emerging and developing countries.
Rapid advancements in digital public infrastructure in India has enabled financial inclusion, transparency in financial transactions, efficient delivery of public welfare, greater ease of doing business and ease of living. Do you feel India's advanced digital public infrastructure could help in improving financial safety net and act as a model for other G20 countries?
Let me start by saying I've been in India about 4 years, and I see myself as a student of the Indian economy. And I have seen many, many things in India that are remarkable, that offer lessons to other countries in how they approach their own challenges. And I think one of the most impressive things to learn from India has to do with the digital public infrastructure that the country has built. It is certainly world-class and does offer lessons to the rest of the world. And in particular, there's one unique feature of India's DPI, or digital public infrastructure, and that is the interoperable building blocks that facilitate the interaction in the digital economy. And by that I mean identity, or Aadhaar, I mean payments, or UPI, and the data exchange layer, which is the account aggregator and others.
And do you think G20 can arrive at some consensus on collectively regulating financial risks related to use of cryptocurrencies?
India has made the regulation of crypto assets an important priority for its G20 presidency. And in the process, it has triggered a very in-depth conversation among the main economies on how to approach this. The IMF has collaborated by producing a technical report on the new instruments and how to deal with it, that the G20 will move forward in this agenda that has been prioritized by India.
And Mr. Breuer, India has deftly navigated its economy through the recent global challenges to emerge as the fastest growing major economy in the world. In fact, IMF Managing Director also lauded India for being a sweet spot in the global economy. How do you see India's G20 presidency so far? Can we hope that G20 under the leadership of India will deliver on its debt management, development and decarbonization plans? What are your key expectations from the upcoming G20 Leaders Summit in New Delhi?
India is definitely a sweet spot in the world economy, and in an international economy that is facing significant challenges, India does come out in very good light. Now, in terms of India's G20 presidency, as you know, it has centered on the theme One Earth, One Family, and One Future, and brought together members to discuss some of the most important challenges facing the world today: climate change, unsustainable debt for low-income countries, how to strengthen macroeconomic coordination in a world that is facing geofragmentation, and how to respond to the opportunities and risks of the digital technologies. I think that these actions are already bearing fruit, even though the G20 process continues. India is championing efforts to strengthen multilateral development banks, including in their capacity to tackle climate risks. India is also supporting tangible progress on addressing debt vulnerabilities, including through co-chairing, as we discussed, the Global Sovereign Roundtable, and helping to build consensus on implementing the Common Framework, which is another program for debt restructuring for low-income countries. And India, working with the G20, has encouraged other countries to think more deeply on the real-world impact of digital money, crypto assets, and other new technologies, with India sharing its knowledge and experience in building a sophisticated digital public infrastructure. So these have been very concrete contributions so far, and the process is not over.
Mr. Breuer, thank you so much for taking out time speaking to Akashvani.
Thank you very much.
You were listening to an exclusive interview with Louis Breuer, International Monetary Fund Senior Resident Representative to India, on strengthening global financial safety net under India's G20 presidency. Interviewer was Sonu Sood, anchor. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of Akashvani. You can listen to it on our mobile app News on AIR. This program is also available on our YouTube channel News on AIR Official. You may share your feedback about this program through email at airnsdtalks@gmail.com or WhatsApp on 928 909 4044.